Covered in impenetrable forests and lined with craggy coastlines, Alaska has achieved almost a mythic status as the last frontier. The land of the midnight sun holds a plethora of enigmatic stories and legends. Over the years, Alaska has seen its fair share of reported UFO sightings over the years. Its vast wilderness, extreme weather conditions, and sparse population have contributed to the mystique surrounding unusual sightings in the state. These sightings often range from mysterious lights and objects to more elaborate encounters with unidentified flying objects. One notable incident in Alaska's UFO history is the Alaska Triangle, which is often compared to the Bermuda Triangle due to its reputation for unexplained disappearances and strange phenomena. Stretching from the southeastern city of Juneau to the northern Barrow Mountain Range and to the western city of Anchorage, this triangular area encompasses some of the most rugged and uninhabited terrain in the United States. The mystery of the Alaska Triangle is fueled by a series of unexplained events that have occurred over many decades. Countless individuals, including hikers, tourists, pilots, and even experienced outdoorsmen, have vanished without a trace while traversing the region. Aircraft have disappeared mid-flight, leaving no wreckage or evidence behind. Ships have gone missing in the waters surrounding the triangle, their crews never to be seen again. These inexplicable disappearances have left investigators baffled and spawned numerous theories ranging from natural phenomena to extraterrestrial activity. One of the most mysterious cases that baffles investigators to this day is the disappearance of a military transport plane called the Douglas C-54, known as the Missing Douglas, which vanished in 1950. On January 26, 1950, the Missing Douglas took off from the Elmendorf Air Base in the middle of the Alaska Triangle with 44 passengers on board. There were 36 passengers and 8 crew members also carrying cargo, and the C-54 is one of the most important planes in the Air Force. During this time in history, it was a year after NATO was formed and the start of the Cold War. The C-54 was headed east, 240 miles to a mandatory point. The plane made the radio call on time, and 2 hours into the flight, it vanished without a trace in the Alaska Triangle. There was no distress call or any indication that there was an emergency. The military base was 56 miles from the Soviet Union, and the USA initially thought they may have shot down the plane. However, the C-54 was traveling away from that region when it disappeared. After the plane did not arrive at its destination, it was declared missing, and an enormous search effort went into action, making it a top priority. 7,000 ground troops and 85 aircraft were deployed to help in the search of the enormous area of 300,000 square miles. No one could determine why and how the Missing Douglas disappeared. After the Douglas C-54 incident, 4 planes crashed mysteriously in the Alaska Triangle. The first plane crashed in the southern end of the triangle and they were rescued. The second aircraft was a C-47 which crashed in the southern part of the search grid. There were no fatalities. A week later, a third search plane went down near the last position the Douglas was last seen. The fourth plane is very significant because it wasn't a search plane. It was a B-36 nuclear bomber, twice as big as the Douglas. The B-36 took off from the Eielson Air Force Base and headed to Fort Worth, Texas, non-stop on an exercise. The plane went over the Pacific before turning back into the triangle towards Juneau. The craft lost all power, the atomic bomb was cast into the ocean, and the plane crashed in Mount Cologit in British Columbia. The nuclear weapon and several thousand pounds of conventional explosives all vanished. The bomb was never found, becoming the first loss of a nuclear bomb in history. 4 airplanes were lost in a 30-day period in the Alaska Triangle. Hostile Soviet Union activity was ruled out. Was it magnetic interference? Electromagnetic forces and gravitational anomaly? Was the C-54 overpowered by superior technology, causing the plane to vanish? In October 1972, a plane carrying the leader of the House of Representatives, Boggs, mysteriously vanished on the southern edge of the triangle. This government disappearance triggered the largest search and rescue operation up to that point in U.S. history. Still, 40 military aircraft and more than 39 search days yielded no sign of wreckage or survivors. No scrap metal, no frozen boots, nothing. Up to now, an astonishing number of people, estimated at 20,000 since the 1970s, have vanished in this vast swath of land. Considering how sparsely populated the area is, that's a shockingly high rate. For the whole of Alaska, it works out to be an average of 2,250 people disappearing every year, twice the national average, many of which appear to occur in this triangle of ultra-rugged land. So, what exactly happened? We just don't know. It remains one of the most mystifying mysteries on the planet. Was it a portal? A wormhole? Is paranormal activity happening in the Alaska Triangle? Was the C-54 abducted by a UFO? The case of the missing Douglas aircraft remains open and unsolved after 70 years. In short, no crash evidence has ever been found. The mysterious circumstances surrounding people and planes missing fueled conspiracy theories. You'd think aliens might have had some part in these strange incidents. Some people believe so. The last frontier state is not immune from UFO cases. November 17th of this year will mark the 38th anniversary of one of the best documented UFO cases ever, and it happened in the skies above Alaska. 3 UFOs played tag with Japan Airlines cargo flight 1628 for 50 minutes while they were visually observed by a sometimes terrified flight crew. During the last 30 minutes, the UFOs were tracked on military and civilian radar, and the entire encounter was verified by a high-level administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA for short. In the own words of John Callahan, who was the division chief of the Accidents, Evaluations, and Investigations Division of the FAA in Washington from 1981 to 1988. I was involved with an investigation of an extraordinary event, but was asked not to talk about it. Since retiring, I decided that the public had a right to this information and that they could handle it. On November 7, 1986, a Japanese 747 cargo jet with a pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer were flying from Iceland to Anchorage just after 5 p.m. when they all saw a gigantic round object, much larger than their cargo jet, with colored lights flashing around it. Captain Kenju Terauchi, a pilot for 29 years, also saw 2 smaller objects, but described the largest spaceship, as he called it, to be at least the size of an aircraft carrier because he had it on his radar, which provided range marks. The object proceeded to fly level with the 747 until it suddenly approached very close. Following the directives of the FAA, Terauchi dropped his jet 4,000 feet and even made a 360-degree turn to avoid the objects, but they continued to follow, even appearing in front of his cockpit. Over the next half hour, the UFO could appear 8 miles in front of him, and in one radar sweep 10 seconds later, it could be 7 miles behind him. Captain Terauchi said the technology was unthinkable because the UFOs appeared to have control over both inertia and gravity. The largest object was captured on 3 separate radars, between the FAA, Air Force, and in the radar screen in the cockpit of JAL Flight 1628. Captain Terauchi said all 3 objects followed his jet for 400 miles, and the FAA flight control reports confirm that the object followed JAL Flight 1628 for at least 32 minutes. At one point, the object was seen on radar to be as close as 5 miles to the jet. In the following days and months, the entire crew was interviewed by FAA officials extensively, each of them providing independent descriptions and drawings of the spaceships and their extraordinary behavior. FAA investigators found the crew, whose experience totals more than 46 years, to be normal, professional, rational, and had no drug or alcohol involvement. John Callahan, who was involved in the investigation of this incident, was called to FAA headquarters to provide a briefing to scientists of President Reagan and CIA officials. In Callahan's words, after reviewing the information, including radar trackings, a CIA official told him, "This event never happened. We were never here. We're confiscating all this data, and you are all sworn to secrecy." And like any sane person would, Callahan asked what the CIA officers thought it was, and he was told it was a UFO, and emphasized that if they came out and told the American public that they ran into a UFO out there, it would cause panic across the country. That's why they kept it under wraps. The CIA then confiscated all the original voice recordings and radar tapes connected to the UFO incident, but they did not know Callahan had copies of everything at his office. Callahan strongly believed Captain Terauchi saw 3 UFOs, and that was the only time a UFO was recorded on radar for such an extended period. Commercial airline pilots again reported UFO sightings in Alaska's skies in January 1987, little more than 2 months after Captain Terauchi claimed he and his crew saw 3 UFOs. On January 29, 1987, the crew of Alaska Airlines Flight 53 sighted a fast-moving object on their onboard weather radar. The plane was flying at 35,000 feet and was approximately 60 miles west of McGrath on a flight from Nome to Anchorage. The crew calculated the UFO was moving at a speed of 18,000 miles per hour as it sped away from them. In short, over the years, individuals have reported countless other UFOs in the skies over Alaska. Eyewitnesses recounted mysterious UFO sightings in the area, describing triangular objects that defied conventional aviation norms. Reports from experienced rescue workers investigating missing persons cases revealed encounters with phantom voices, confusion, and dizziness, attributed to an unknown feature of the Alaskan wilderness. On the other hand, note that as the most sparsely populated state, just 730,000 people live in Alaska, meaning just 1/20th of 1% of the state is inhabited. The rest is relatively untouched wilderness, complete with ragged mountain ranges, glaciers, bitterly cold weather, millions of lakes, countless crevasses, vast valleys, and lots of bears. UFO expert Debbie Ziegelmeyer suggested that the sparsely populated nature of Alaska makes it attractive to aliens. Paranormal investigator Johnny Enoch speculated on secret military involvement. What's a bold idea, but we can rule it out? Either way, note that not only the CIA and FAA, but also NASA are lying about UFO. There's good reason to suspect NASA of being a part of the anti-transparency movement concerning UFOs. NASA itself is part of the cover-up. First off, we have testimony from former NASA contractors like Donna Hare, who claimed NASA had been airbrushing out UFOs in photos they released to the public. These photos could have been enlightening to us all and helped us better understand the phenomenon. Carl Wolf, a military analyst, likewise claimed NASA and other organizations were covering up evidence of structures on the moon. NASA personnel were in the room as they were investigating the evidence for man-made or otherworldly structures on the moon. Now, could both these witnesses be lying? Possibly. But let's get to our next witness that will provide further evidence damning NASA. Gary McKinnon was an IT guy inspired by Donna Hare's testimony. He was concerned about the transparency efforts of the organization and what they had possibly been hiding. He was often concerned about the issues faced by poor pensioners who couldn't afford heating. If there were groundbreaking energy technologies locked away, then for him, this was a crime against humanity. Why hide technology that could solve the world's energy issues and solve our issues with climate change? He is often called a hacker, but this is not quite right. He logged into an unprotected network by chance and was able to access NASA servers. He faced jail time and extradition for these serious charges. But those keeping this a secret have also done a serious wrong. On the server, McKinnon found photos in a proprietary format of a cylindrical-shaped object with domes on it. It had no rivets nor any other evidence for normal manufacturing methods. He also found a list of non-terrestrial officers and the names of various spaceships under the designation USS United States Spaceship. This might be alien, or it might be further evidence for the existence of a secret space program called Solar Warden created by our government. While Gary did a wrong and accessed unauthorized computers, so did the secret keepers who are hiding this from humanity. There are many reports of military abductions that, if true, definitely are unconstitutional and violate the unreasonable search and seizure clause of the Fourth Amendment. NASA's hiding potential evidence for this, and any alien activity or secret space program, is harmful to humanity and to all of us. Thankfully, Gary was never extradited, but the harm was done, his career was ruined, and his life was in tatters. Thankfully, he seems to be doing better now. However, NASA and other organizations were never held to account for what happened. Put simply, there is reasonable evidence for non-human or secret space program activity on the moon that is being covered up. Weird transmissions and sounds have been heard on the moon, as well as strange lights on the moon that seem to disappear and have no explanation. If this is true, then there is seriously something strange on the moon. What natural lights just happened to turn off? While this could be natural, repetitive blinking lights in the same place could indicate a permanent structure. Historian Richard Dolan even investigated this possibility and found evidence that it is true. Could Gary McKinnon be right, and there is a secret space program with structures on the moon built either by humans or someone else? Well, to be honest, we're not saying every scientist at NASA is part of the cover-up. Some probably have no idea. But the NASA administrator and other executives there have at least some idea. The continuing lack of transparency about UFOs in the US is causing concern not only about the existence of aliens, but about the psychological fallout of uncovering a conspiracy. What if we've been lied to about UFOs? If you thought that we were about to finally get the truth about UFOs, think again. At the end of last year, a U.S. government bill that would have mandated the controlled release of all classified documents and artifacts relating to UFOs was significantly watered down at the last minute so that it would get through Congress. Interest in UAPs, the new term for UFOs, reignited in June 2023 when ex-U.S. intelligence agency whistleblower David Grush told the Debrief website that during his official duties, he had discovered the U.S. had indeed been retrieving spacecraft of non-human origin for decades. The claims led to a congressional hearing in which Grush and others described what they had gleaned of this super-secret project or seen with their own eyes during military service. Their testimonies resulted in the new Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Disclosure Act, authored by a bipartisan group of 5 elected representatives, led by Democrat Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Republican Senator Mike Rounds. While it is easy to focus on the extraordinary nature of the subject or the credibility of those witnessing UAPs, the prospect of alien spacecraft raises serious issues that go beyond whether we're alone in the universe. Lots of scientific work is underway, not only to look for signs of extraterrestrial life, but more recently to ask what it would mean psychologically for us if aliens really do exist, and, potentially worse, if the authorities have been lying to us about what they know. When it comes to governments, the primary issue is trust. As Republican Congressman Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin explained in his opening remarks on 26 July, the lack of government transparency regarding UAPs has fueled wild speculation and debate for decades, eroding public trust in the very institutions that are meant to serve and protect them. The original text of the UAP Disclosure Act was similar in that it proposed the creation of a national archive, overseen by an independent panel of 9 U.S. citizens. Their job was to decide, free of military, political, or corporate influence, when and how to disclose information from the archive. The act would have empowered the panel to hold more hearings, with witnesses afforded immunity from prosecution. It also proposed that The federal government shall exercise eminent domain over any and all recovered technologies of unknown origin and biological evidence of non-human intelligence that may be controlled by private persons or entities in the interest of the public good. In other words, the U.S. government could commandeer any supposed artifacts held by private citizens or companies and was then under a duty to disclose them to the public. In parallel, the act also called for the Secretary of State to contact any foreign government that may hold material relevant to unidentified anomalous phenomena, technologies of unknown origin, or non-human intelligence and seek disclosure of such material. In short, it would finally have revealed the facts about UAPs. But most of these stipulations have now been struck out. All that remains is the archive, but it will not be administered by an independent body. Following the vote, Schumer described the archive as a major win for government transparency, but then went on to say that it was an outrage that the proposed review board was not adopted. Now it means that declassification of UAP records will be largely up to the same entities that have blocked and obfuscated their disclosure for decades. Speaking to News Nation on 12th of December, Grush was unequivocal, calling the changes the greatest legislative failure in American history. Not only has the act done little to improve transparency, it is already driving the suspicion that the U.S. government really does have something to hide. As clinical psychologist Daniel Stubbings of Cardiff Metropolitan University says, if it is the case that there is no substance to the UFO-UAP issue beyond misperceptions, paranoia, delusions, hallucinations, gullibility, and disinformation, then the government, military, and academic organizations need to openly and transparently look under every alleged rock in this topic. But they have chosen to do the exact opposite, which increases the suspicion that there is something to hide. After all, people have been seeing unexplainable things in the sky for millennia. While it is easy to dismiss them as hallucinations or flights of fancy, it is much harder to ignore photographs and videos from reputable sources. This is exactly what the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in the U.S. released in 2021. Its report, Preliminary Assessment, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, detailed that the U.S. Department of Defense's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force was investigating 144 UAP reports made between 2004 and 2021, mostly by military personnel. It also released 3 declassified videos of some of these UAPs in action. It was such material that helped persuade Stubbings to take the subject seriously. He interviewed people who believed they had seen something they could not explain, interested in identifying any underlying mental health needs or common personality types among them. He found that all kinds of personality profiles see UAPs, and many are left with unmet psychological needs. As Stubbings explains, initially I felt confident that the UAP issue could be explained by prosaic psychological and/or situational factors. But the more I looked into real cases, the less sure I became. I started realizing this is a very credible topic. If true, it's a game changer. If it's not true, it's deeply concerning. How did we get to this point in society where we are thinking all this stuff is true and we're spending all this money looking into it? Traditionally, it is astronomers who look for evidence of other life in the universe. For example, SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, uses telescopes to look for signals that could be coming from alien civilizations. While SETI was once on the fringes of astronomical science, it is now increasingly seen as mainstream. Breakthrough. LISTEN is the largest ever scientific research program searching for evidence of civilizations beyond Earth. It aims to survey the 1M closest stars to Earth and 100 closest galaxies to our own. Running since January 2016 at the University of California, Berkeley, the project announced a new headquarters in Oxford last October. And according to Steve Croft, an astronomer at UC Berkeley and the SETI Institute, and also a senior researcher at the new HQ. For the project, it's a big vote of confidence from one of the premier universities, astrophysics groups, and physics departments in the world. In early December, Croft and colleagues published results from the project from more than 140 terabytes of data, the equivalent of watching more than 5 years of continuous high-definition video from 97 nearby galaxies. Although they found nothing that looked artificial in this particular run, Croft says, it's a start. Other astronomers using different techniques have seen things that warrant further investigation. Beatrice Villarroel, assistant professor of physics at Stockholm University, is leading a team of astronomers looking at photographic plates of the night sky that date from before the first artificial satellite was launched in 1957. As satellites orbit the Earth, they can reflect sunlight, causing bright glints to appear in the night sky. These leave streaks on astronomical images or spots of light that appear and disappear seemingly at random. Mysteriously, on one plate from April 1950, Villarroel found 9 sources of light that appeared within a half-hour period and then vanished. Conducting observations using the Gran Telescopio Canarias on La Palma in the Canary Islands revealed nothing at the locations of the light sources that might have flared up. In other words, there is no astronomical explanation for this type of event. More recently, her team found 3 bright stars on a plate dated 19th of July 1952 that have since vanished. Provocatively, this is a date burned into the diaries of UFO enthusiasts around the world because it coincides with a famous incident in which pilots and radar operators saw lights they couldn't explain in the skies above Washington, D.C. I think it's very important to do this kind of nearby searching for extraterrestrial objects because the astronomical community mostly looks for things very, very far away. I think it's time to do something new, says Villarroel, who is now working to establish the ExoProbe project to look for anomalous objects among the vast number of human satellites currently in orbit. But what happens if she, or anyone else, uncovers irrefutable proof that non-human intelligences have visited or are visiting Earth? A few years ago, physicist John Priestland, who runs an engineering consultancy, found himself wondering what this would mean to us as individuals. According to Priestland, if there is something here to be disclosed, there are a lot of people who will be affected, and there isn't an entity out there, as far as wondering can see, that is putting people first. So he set up Unhidden, a charity dedicated to decreasing the stigma associated with discussing UAPs, non-human intelligences, and the possibility that evidence is being covered up by governments. It's a mission that Stubbings agrees with. But Priestland also notes that there is still a stigma around this topic. People are so frightened about discussing it. But it only takes one account to be real, and it changes the narrative of humanity forever. This is why the Disclosure Act was seen as important, and its altered version is such a disappointment, even potentially dangerous. As Priestland says, these days it's all about my truth, except for people who happen to see strange things in the sky. We don't legitimize their truth. That's why they need help and support. And we need to do that in the context of possible disclosure, because there might suddenly be 8 billion people who have to get used to the fact that they're being told that there's a very different worldview by exactly the organizations that they now realize have lied to them for the past 80 years. As a piece of good news, NASA said Thursday that the study of UFOs will require new scientific techniques, including advanced satellites, as well as a shift in how unidentified flying objects are perceived. The space agency released the findings after a year-long study into UFOs. In its 33-page report, an independent team commissioned by NASA cautioned that the negative perception surrounding UFOs poses an obstacle to collecting data. But officials said NASA's involvement should help reduce the stigma around what it calls UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. As NASA Administrator Bill Nelson stated, we want to shift the conversation about UAPs from sensationalism to science. The agency promised an open and transparent approach. That's all the information that we have for you today. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you never miss out on future episodes. And be sure to also tell us what you think about today's content. Everyone's support motivates us to continue delivering quality content and to always improve. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.